Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, depending where you are. I think we are starting this webinar officially. Today, I'm really pleased to chair this webinar titled Animal Welfare, Bridging Policy and Practice. I'm Fabio Santeramo. I'm a professor at the European University Institute and at the University of Foggia. And I have to give a special thanks to Andrea Rosati, the Secretary General, and Federico Liguori for organizing this webinar on behalf of the European Federation of Animal Science. This is possibly part of a joint event that we would like to organize together. When I say we, I mean with the Florence School of Regulation of the European University Institute. Now, before we start, let me say that this is going to be a relatively long webinar. So take a sit, grab a coffee, and relax. We're going to have roughly a couple of hours of relaxed speech with a terrific panel that I'm going to show in a second with the slides. I hope you can see the slide. Can you see the slide with the speaker? I guess so. So it's going to be me just giving an introduction. So I'm not going to take more than a few more minutes. Then we're going to have Andrea Gavinelli, that is head of unit of DG SANTE of the European Commission. He's going to discuss about the current and future EU regulation and policy on animal welfare. He's the head of unit of animal welfare. And this particular relevant, this topic, I mean, we know that we have now a new EU commissioner on health and animal welfare. So animal welfare was already a very big topic. Now, if possible, is even bigger. We are going to have Laura Boyle of TEGASC that is going to give a talk on the role of animal welfare in the role of science in shaping policies, the implementation of those policies, the challenges. So it's basically, the science at support of policymakers. And to close the circle, last but not least at all, Imon Xian is a representative of the businesses that are actually facing at the downstream level what the policy imply in practice. So he's basically a dairy farm of a large farm, and he's going to give a practical example on how scientific advances in animal welfare impact the farming practices. So again, Andrea Gavinelli is going to be the first speaker. Let me just tell you a little bit more. Andrea is a veterinarian and EU policy official since 1999. As I said, a focus on animal welfare, and as working extensively on animal welfare within the EU. Since 2016, he has coordinated policies on official control and disease eradication. And in the last few more years, he has overseen animal welfare and antimicrobial resistance policies within the EU farm-to-fork strategy. He has worked on several other issues, including the risk management and policies of risk management. So I think we are really excited to have Andrea Gavinelli here speaking today. Before giving the floor to him, let me also introduce Laura Boyle. So the style that I want to use today is just to present all the speakers. Laura is, I'm going to be very brief. I mean, as I said, it's going to take a few minutes. Otherwise, we are going to have an intro of half an hour, and we don't want to have that. So she's a senior research officer in the pig development department at TEGASC, has also worked at the INRA, and actually is president within the European Association for Animal Production of the Health and Welfare Study Commission. So I think she's very well placed to represent the scientific community working on these very topics. Imon Xian is a dairy farmer managing more than 180 acres, and he's starting his activity in more than 10 years ago, and is basically growing Frisian cows and also breeds sport horses. But more important, is very much prioritizing environmental sustainability, and is also participant of the Irish Farmer Association Smart Farming Program. So is very well placed as businesses to basically tell us what's going on from their perspective. And so he will be a critical voice to whatever Andrea Gavinelli is going to say. I mean, the real idea of those debates is actually to debate. And I'm saying this to anticipate that all the attendees can clearly write in the chat. We would like to have your comments, your questions, and after the speech of everyone, so everyone will have about 20 minutes, we will have more time to discuss. So please don't be shy and ask as many questions as you want. We will peek and we will feed the debate with your questions. So I want to just spend the last 2 minutes to say that is very topical, very timely, this webinar. Because as I said, we have this, we have the new commissioner for health and animal welfare, Olivier Varelli, that is focused on completing the European Health Union, that is focusing on many, many aspects. So clearly, just to mention some, like the resistance to antimicrobials, that's very important. I'm not mentioning something that is really not related to animal welfare. It's much bigger, the challenge that he has to face. But also transport of animals, that's very important, and the new legislation, regulation on dogs and cats, and preventing, the entry of animals that may challenge our food, our safety standards. So those are the challenges that the commissioner has to face. We are here to debate, and we are here to understand how the agenda can be operationalized in the best possible way, feeding again the discussion with important and relevant statements. So let me stop here. I guess I took 1 minute less, and the floor is to Andrea Gavinelli. But the very last things before I give the floor to him, let me say that we are organizing other events together. One of those is actually a training. So let me put in the chat the link to a survey that eventually, while the webinar is run, you may complete. But please do not pay attention to the survey. Indeed, pay attention to Andrea Gavinelli. Thanks again, Andrea, for being with us. The floor is yours.
Grazie, Fabio. Thank you very much, and hello to all the colleagues that are part of this exercise today. Let me put my micro even closer. I hope the sound will be good for all of you. And in this way, I'm very much happy to be able to contribute today to this webinar. And happy in particular because we are sitting here with Laura Boyle from TIGASH as an important authority for the scientific and technical investments and developments that we are in the need for evolving and modernizing the EU animal welfare acquis. And of course, first of all, as important a farmer that is exactly the real link to what is the evolution and the purpose of our work. Actually, starting with the farmers, as you know, we are talking in a moment that is relevant and extremely politically sensitive, because it's the moment in which, in fact, after a strategic dialogue in which farmers and different stakeholders have been sitting together to imagine how to strengthen and make EU agriculture more resilient, with this exchange that lasted the summer of 2024. Now we are concluding in a few days a document that was engaged by all, that is a vision for the future of agriculture that will be adopted by the Commission in a few days. and signed by the president. So we have a new commission, and we will have soon also a pathway for the future that will reflect all the experiences and the different elements that have been brought by farmers, civil society, producer, retailers, consumers to the table of the commission in the consultation that happened during the strategic dialogue. Bringing policy and practice is exactly the challenge of my work as an head of unit for animal welfare, sitting so to lead a small team of veterinarian, agrarian, economist, and working on preparing and supporting the assessment for what could be the major issue for a reform and to bring into a future-proof situation what is an acquis on animal welfare that is historical for the European Union, that has been really, the roots of this acquis are in the 90s and even before, and are part of the European society way of living. Is a European way of doing things, to be honest. Farming with a quality that is going beyond the simple public animal health and food safety, but is having an ethical and moral component. But how to transform this in practice, that is exactly why we need people like Laura and Eamon at the same time. In fact, the way to transform the spirit of certain aspiration of the EU citizens, like, for example, when the European citizens together sign an initiative to demand to the European Commission to phase out the cages for certain species of animals, and they've been using a democratic tool that is the European Citizen Initiative tool that is in the treaty, a tool in which more than 1 million of people together, with the representativity of the whole EU, are addressing this type of question, this type of task to the Commission. And the Commission recognized that phasing out cages is something that will be examined as a possibility. I mean, all this demands to know what we are producing for the future in alternative and what we want to achieve as a transition to this new system. So policy starts with several components on animal welfare. Starts from the fact that we have knowledge of innovation and technology that are showing that certain type of improvements in farming could lead with better health, better welfare, and more public health, like was just mentioned by Federico, the reduction of antibiotics use in animals, or in other area. We have, for example, now the important evolution of phasing out the culling of day-old chicks, the male ones, thanks to the sexing that could happen in oven. All these are technology that are bringing the EU at the forefront of the, we can say, livestock approach and the sustainable farm. The first point, so is, as I said, the capacity to see the bridge between technology innovation and the needs that are reflecting in a social and ethical concern. And I mentioned this, the culling of the day-old chicks was an example, the cages is another. An issue that the EU citizens feels have an important way to keep attached to the EU production and a European way of doing things. The second element, of course, is the economic sustainability. This is a sophisticated element to be analyzed and to be put in practice when we work, exactly as I said, as we are bridging the policy to the practice, because it's clear that investments and what is the redditivity of a production has to be clearly calculated, and is a delicate exercise, including the fact that we have an internal market and an external market that are competing. We have in this process, first of all, the task to analyze the different data that are related to this. For example, we saw that in the internal market, the lack of initiative from the EU on animal welfare in certain areas since more than 20 years. One example is for example, the phasing out of the cages, created different approaches in different member states, creating so also a discrepancy in the cost of production and different level of competitiveness between the farmers. So in a single market, this is clearly something where we have to operate with instruments that will put a fair competitiveness situation between the farmer. The second element that is relevant is the competitiveness versus the rest of the world. And this is an element that is extremely actual, debated and highlighted by many, including farmer organizations. We have in Europe a set of standards that are or European or national, in any case extremely important and higher than certain other parts of the world. It's clear that we have more and more the need to ensure transparency and a fair competition with what is the import in the EU, and we have to study the better way. And this opens up the discussion that we could develop on the use of equivalent means of farming and the integration of the use of indicators as an element for assessing the quality of the welfare of the animals in a farming condition. The area of indicators was developed, first of all, with research. I could recall here a project of many years ago, but it was one of the biggest and the first in the world. That was the Welfare Quality Project, in which for the first time the farming practices and the way animals were coping with their environment was quantified with the use of particular indicators. This starting point, one example, for example, we have even in the legislation, the one on broiler welfare, as you know, refer to the lesion of the foot of the animal as indicator for the quality of their life, because of course the lesions and scoring them is making you aware of what are the conditions of the litter and also what are the conditions of the animals in terms of their density. So this was a preliminary step that we had in the EU legislation, but all the rest of the farming legislative acquis is not in fact updated, and more and more has been invested. As an example, probably you are aware, the EU public-private partnership on health and welfare is founding with Horizon Europe in 2020 and more several research and innovation projects in this area. And these are now running for, I mean, the budget is probably the highest ever spent in this area because it's around 30 million euro. And there are different clusters that are bringing effect, and the objective is really also to help practically farmers and policy makers to decide in which way to make steps towards increasing and investing in animal welfare standards. I can mention several. I don't know if I have time to go into detail of these different projects because they're really several. But what is interesting to say is that we have not investment only just on the indicators per se to measure what is the quality of an animal life, like the footpad lesion I was saying. But in fact, we have investment also in policy communication, for example, in relation to the way that we could even incentivize the understanding, increase the understanding of the citizens and the final consumer, or what are the investments that are done for animal welfare in a farm, and the capacity to understand how we step up in quality in that sense. So we have several interlinked area of activity, not the pure one related to the research and indicators, but all the, we can say, the network of possibilities that we could create with this information. Another important element to say is that all is also connected with the common agricultural policy. The common agricultural policy per se is, as you know, undergoing an important reform that will come soon, is connected, in fact, with the vision on agriculture that I cannot anticipate because it's really under negotiation during these days, this week actually, to be finalized, but you will see it soon. And we'll give the highlights of the main pillars of what will be the reform of the common agricultural policy. On this, we can say welfare is fully part of it, as it comes from the strategic dialogue, as I said at the beginning. And one element that is interesting for me to highlight, again, on this principle, how we could transform policy into practice, is the capacity to strengthen the value that people in Europe are giving to food produced by animals, strengthening this value through links that could be strengthened even more between the farming, the territory, and of course, the food that is having a cultural identity. So we need several elements to push this area together. One of these, of course, is clearly innovation. Innovation in the way we look into quality of a cow life when it's related to the milk that is produced, that is having at the end an historical value for the type of cheese that is related to the territory in which I'm living. So you understand, it's a connection in which practically we step up from what was the idea that a cow is happy because you have on the milk packaging the smiling cow on a grassland in the mountains, but instead to make people understanding and transparently informed that the investment in livestock precision or in sensors or whatever technology that allow us to monitor and ensure that the quality of animal welfare is related and appropriate for really producing a liter of milk that is having what we can call a smiley cow. But the smiley cow is related to factual and technical technologies that are implemented. This consumer's relationship with food has evolved a lot and is also one of the pusher, one of the elements that are catalyzing our work in terms of understanding also how it could be a way to give a premium market for this type of investments, because common agricultural policy could come to support financially this transition. It will be important for the resilience of the system, as I said, but at the same time, and this is also very important, we have to ensure that, as I said, the value of the food, the ethical, social value that the citizens are giving to the food produced by animals stays, and is also going and matching this relationship that we are creating with the consumers. So, as you see, is a scenario quite sophisticated. I'm pleased to be head of an animal welfare unit because, in fact, this argument, this topic is really a sort of, we can say, I can call it a safety belt for livestock in the future. It has to be understood as an element in which the civil society, the farmer, the scientific world, and then what is the economic and trade aspects have to sit together. And we are in the planning of a reform a reform that will come during this mandate, as I said, and will be based on a dialogue between all these parties, a strong dialogue that will collect all the information that we need, and will try to put this on a long-term perspective to ensure also sustainable investment in that sense. So I think with this I can conclude my general introduction, and I can conclude also saying that we will give surely priority to this, respecting the citizens in particular when we talk about the ACI and the KGH. But not forget, as was mentioned, what is already ongoing in the Council and Parliament, the discussion on a new element that is the welfare of dogs and cats and their traceability. Because at the end, that's another, and I conclude with this saying, this evolution of consumer relationship with food is having a clear matching also with the interest that the European citizens are expressing in the animals they are having as part of their life, in their families. And the commercial interests that are also related to it, that are an important economic aspect, but at the same time are really affecting the quality of the life of a family. For example, when they do a bad decision in buying a dog or a cat with certain breeding and genetic problems that could cause sufferance to the animal, at the end sufferance to the family, and problems that are really really a moment of disappointment versus who is breeding, who is trading, and so on. This is something that affects more in general. What we invested in the research done for this proposal that was done in December 2024, sorry, 23, we realized clearly how citizens see a package of this human-animal relation. And the European citizens, I repeat, are saying this with a European way of thinking about when they write about us, when they talk about us, about the way they need a respect for what they eat and the animals and the rest. So thank you very much, and of course, happy to have more questions on this.
Thank you, Andrea, very much. I mean, we expected to have a very insightful presentation. I think you have been way more insightful than what we expected. So I don't know if we were undervalue your speech, but indeed, I think it's the opposite is true. So we were already expecting a lot, but it's a really outstanding what's coming in the near future. So just to synthesize very quickly, so quick synthesis, technology innovation, economic sustainability and competitiveness, internal and external. Andrea has discussed about traceability and the actual relationship between a human and animal. That's very important. So animal welfare that is going beyond what's happening to the animals actually, but is really something that is reflecting us, the citizens of Europe. He also already emphasized the importance of research, for instance, in solving practical issues like breeding issues that may result in economic loss, economic insustainability. And also gave another very important element saying that research in animal welfare is really under the spotlight of the Commission. That's a very big news, good news for researchers like me, like Laura Boyle, and also for those that want to hear more about what's going on in terms of research. So let me just take this chance to say that if you want to really hear more about this, don't forget to attend the annual meeting of the association, the federation. The next annual meeting will be at the end of August, between 25th and the 29th of August, and it's going to be in the beautiful Innsbruck. More information will be on the website of the European Federation of Animal Science. Having said that, I don't want to take longer, and then I would say the floor is to Laura Boyle for another very insightful discussion. So I see Laura, so the floor is yours. we see your presentation. It's not in presentation mode, but we can see it well.
Okay, can you hear me?
Very well.
Good. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much to the EAP and Andrea and Federico and to the Florence School of Regulation for inviting me to speak today. And I'm going to talk to you about my role, our role as farm animal welfare scientists. I've looked through the list of participants and I can see a lot of friends and colleagues and familiar faces and names that I've liaised with over the past 30 years in my job as a farm animal welfare scientist. I really don't have to talk too much about the policy drivers because Andrea has already talked about it. We can go back as far as Ruth Harrison's book to document the fact that there are very real problems with intensive agriculture in particular, but with livestock production in general. And we have a lot of consumer and societal concern about these issues. We also have to protect the social and bringing us right up to date to all the policy that the EU has enacted since then. Animal welfare is about the physical and mental state of an animal in relation to the conditions in which it lives and dies as defined by the WOA. And of course, it is underpinned by a lot of fundamental, very basic science in a number of disciplines. It's multidisciplinary: physiology, ethology, psychology. And we use these tools and others to gain animal perspectives in relation to the conditions in which it lives and dies. But for us and for many of you in the audience, having had a scan through the participants, we're very involved in animal welfare assessment. And we have now got the 5 domains framework from David Mellor, which takes into account the mental and affective state of animals. And in our job as, I suppose, applied farm animal welfare scientists, we're very much involved in quantifying the harms, the costs, and increasingly the benefits, and providing evidence-based to support improvements to housing, management, transport, and slaughter practices. As very applied scientists, we are also very engaged with science, with ethics and the law, and also with practice. And for many of us that are doing a lot in the field, we have firsthand experience of what's actually happening out on farms and what's happening in the lorries and what's happening in the abattoirs. And you can see, I know Alicia is in the audience there, some students of mine, Ninka, that have gone on to great careers in animal welfare science. And also in this picture, I'm showing some of my colleagues in Teagasc, because Teagasc is an organization that not only is involved in research, but also advisory and education. And we therefore have very close contact with industry, which gives us a strong insight into practice and into the constraints and challenges that industry faces. So I suppose an alternative title for my talk is really lessons I've learned from my almost 30 years as a farm animal welfare scientist. And while this is very personal to me, I know from talking to many of you at occasions like Waffle last year in Florence and the EAP, these experiences mirror a lot of yours also, especially for those of us that have been around for, 20, 30, 40 years. There's 4 stories I really want to engage with, and these really are in chronological order of how I encountered them through my career. One was the sow housing story. The second is the pigtail. The third is about the abolition of milk quota, and where we were trying to identify potential animal welfare challenges of a more general change in agricultural policy, not necessarily specifically policy to do with animal welfare. And then bringing me right up to date to a project I'm involved in at the moment about preparing the pig and the industry for free farrowing. The evidence base, a lot of the evidence is a lot of science that was done on the island of Ireland, and for a special issue of the Irish Journal of Agriculture and Food Research, myself and my colleagues here in both the North and the Republic of Ireland would have written these 2 papers, which really gives an overview of a lot of the research I'm going to talk about. But also more recently, Stacey Hendricks and Ocean Smith and I have been editing an issue of Animal Frontiers, which is a journal of various animal science organizations, including the EAAP, and we were invited to put together this issue, which includes 7 perspective papers, which also reflect a lot of what I'm going to say and which inform a lot of what I'm going to say. And these are legacies of the WAFL conference that was held in Florence last year, and the EAP in Florence, which was very strongly animal welfare oriented. So if I talk about the sow housing story first, when I first started my master's research, sows were still in tethers. The system is banned since 2006, but a lot of my master's research was conducted on lesions and culling reasons for animals in these types of housing systems. And I'd like to think that some of that research, which was published, informed the bans on these systems of housing animals, which really are so severely conflict with good welfare. Obviously, group housing for sows came in then from 2013, but we were very much influenced and liaised a lot with researchers in Northern Ireland and the UK, like Don Broom and Sandra Edwards. I saw Sandra's in the audience there, who did a lot of the early work on group housing, because of course group housing was banned in the UK from 1999, and across the border for us here in Ireland, it was also, group housing came in much earlier. So there was a lot of liaising with our colleagues across the British Isles, I suppose, on these issues. And a lot of the studies and projects that I developed, certainly in the early part of my career on group housing, came from these collaborations. I suppose the last barrier to freedom for the pregnant sow in the EU, to the pregnant sow, is this weaning to 28 days. And I was involved as a hearing expert with EFSA on the development. Particularly, I had a big role in developing this section within the European within the EFSA's report on the welfare of pigs on farm, which came out in 2022. And this was, of course, in response to the End the Cage Age, which seeks to get animals out of gestation stalls throughout pregnancy. We engage a lot, as I said, and especially on this issue, in knowledge dissemination and knowledge transfer to the industry. And this report, Di Chair is in the audience there as well, helped contribute to the development of this report to try and prepare the industry for group housing. We traveled, we did workshops, lots of meetings with farmers, and stressed that group housing really meets the needs of sows. It has a higher potential for good welfare. And we tried to stress all the features of good group housing that, that encourage optimal welfare in sows. And we stressed in a lot of those activities that wrong decisions made now, so in the transfer to group housing, could have serious implications for the longevity of the national sow herd in 5 years' time. And I found that statement in that document. And keep that in mind when we look at the impact. So there certainly was an overnight dramatic, when you ban a system, you get a dramatic change overnight almost. And it certainly meant freedom from close confinement for, thousands, millions of pregnant sows. But we did see an increase in things like leg and hoof lesions. This is work done by Amy Quinn. She travelled to almost all the farms around Ireland and documented lameness. We still had a large population of sows in stalls and loose, and there was a higher proportion of non-lame sows that were in stalls. And really, if we look into some of the reasons for this, while we advocated systems such as this that offered, individual places to lie, opportunities for straw bedding, in reality, due to financial constraints, a lot of Irish farmers opted for systems like this, fully slatted systems with no protection for sows while feeding. And really, this system does not optimize, obviously, sow welfare. So while obviously they have the ability to move, and that's a great achievement, we in one way swapped some welfare problems for others. And unfortunately, this is data from our CHUGS profit monitor. It shows an increase in sow mortality. And I understand that this is across the EU, and I'm not saying it's a causal, that it's caused by the switch to group housing, but certainly in systems such as this, compared to this, and combined with the production intensities, we are seeing an increase in sow mortality, and it's actually up to 8% at the moment in Ireland in 2023. Farmers, however, were very satisfied with the change to group housing, and most would never go back. If we look then at the story of the pigtail, tail biting, of course, is hugely problematic on intensive farms. Docking of pigs became ubiquitous with intensification in the industry, but it causes pain. An injury and routine tail docking is banned in the EU since 1991. Routine tail docking is banned, which means that other changes must be made to the management, such as improvement in environmental conditions before tail docking should be carried out. But in a very important paper by Elena Nallon and Nancy de Byrne, where they talk about where we are a quarter of a century on from this legislation, I found it interesting that they mentioned that some changes, for example, in legislative requirements for more space for pigs came in after the ban on routine tail docking. So if you look at the timeline, which is borrowed from this paper, you see routine tail docking down here, but really not much happening for many years. And it's up at this end in the past decade, I guess, since I first, and along with Keelan O'Driscoll, started looking at ways to implement the legislation on farms. And this is in a situation where we had 99% of pigs were tail docked and in fully slatted systems, which are much more difficult to. Is there a problem, Fabio?
Yeah, I'm sorry. It seems that your slides are not changing. So
oh my God, people only know that now. I'm only hearing that. Oh my God.
We can probably fix that.
What's that?
I mean, we can clearly fix. Maybe you can.
Will I stop sharing?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it says my screen sharing is paused. What a disaster. Okay, I'll stop sharing.
Yeah. I mean, we have seen till maybe
till when?
I think the slide on the evidence, so we probably missed quite a few.
People should have spoken up sooner. Okay. Well, I'm not going to go back over those slides. So where was I? I was on the pigtail, wasn't I?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it doesn't really matter. I mean, it does matter, but maybe I should share before let's just see. Share. And now, can you see?
Yeah, we can see actually.
Can you see the tail biting?
Yeah.
Risk of tail biting?
Yes, that's all changing now.
Oh, that's so unfortunate. Anyway, this is what I was talking about. This was a rambling on about while nobody told me that they couldn't see my slides. Yeah. So, yeah. Okay. So here we are. We stepped in after the legislation on the routine docking of pigs was implemented to try and find ways to implement this in practice. Can you see this slide now? A decade of research on the iceberg indicator, Fabio.
Yeah. Now we can see.
Okay, so Keelan and I were asked to put it together, this presentation on the research that was done in the area of tail biting. And I'm not going to go into the detail, and this is only a selection of the papers and the topics, but suffice to say that a lot of work was done, a lot of liaising with regulatory authorities within EU and Ireland, participation in cost actions, etc., in an attempt to implement this policy at farm level. We also undertook a lot of knowledge transfer and initiatives, other initiatives. You can see it, Fabio? Yes? Moving? Good. Okay.
Yeah.
But if we move to the impact, and a lot of this comes from our on-farm or our in-factory studies where we follow pigs from our various trials into the abattoir and we look at tail lesions. This isn't up to date. We've some more work done since then, but you can see very little change. And in fact, a slightly worrying increase in the percentage of severe tail lesions. This is just a graph prepared recently for one of our newsletters, but it does suggest, and we still have more or less 99% of our pigs tail docked. So it reflects a frustrating lack of progress on this topic. And this is in an industry that is seeing an increase in weaner and finisher mortality. And I don't believe that this is just for Ireland. This is, manifested in intensive industries across Europe. Much more efficient, fast-growing pigs, but in a background, of high production intensity and fewer and larger herds. So I think that the multifactorial nature of tail biting is a big problem, and it's well captured in this recent book produced by Keelan O'Driscoll and Anna Valros and Brill Publishers. And I think really what we look for so often with something like tail biting or antimicrobial use is a silver bullet solution. And really, as a recent review on the use of antimicrobials by Maria da Costa and Alicia Diana, you know, there's very little emphasis and very little interest in systematic change in housing systems. And you're not going to solve a problem like tail biting with a silver bullet, basically. It brings me then to the end of milk quota story. And as you know, milk quota was abolished in the EU in 2015. And in Ireland, in the years coming up to quota abolishment, there was a dramatic increase in cow herd numbers, and these animals were in larger herds. Against this background, in contrast to pigs, perhaps, and poultry, we had a much less clearer picture of cow welfare in the EU, and this was reflected in this report by DG Health and Food Safety. But we do know in Ireland, at least, that, you know, we're operating in a system that has welfare advantages, mostly associated with the grazing period, but there were worries of potential threats to cow welfare. And because of this, our Department of Ag funded a project to try and identify some of these challenges associated with the quota abolition. And there was a lot of different tasks in this project, but a lot of it was talking to stakeholders like vets, dairy farmers, and dairy advisors, and asking them how they felt and their concerns and their fears. And if we look at the welfare concerns amongst these three stakeholder groups, for vets, the top concern they had with expansion and quota abolition was lameness in dairy cows. Farmers were concerned about managing nutrition of animals in these larger herds, and that there would be poor body condition, while dairy advisors expressed concern about overcrowding and social stress. And in general, the majority of participants in these groups felt that there was going to be more risks than benefits to cow welfare associated with expansion. Now, subsequent epidemiological research conducted by colleagues here, Myrne Keneally and team here at Moore Park, looked at cow welfare in our pasture-based systems, but during housing and during the grazing period. Can you still see my slides, Fabio? Yes, okay. And just some of the findings from this research were that the younger farmers and larger herds had a higher proportion of thin cows. While lameness is arguably low compared to total confinement systems, it's still a large variation between it, and it is such a serious welfare problem. One of the main take-homes that I have from this research is numerous cubicle housing deficiencies, and this was actually something that we identified in the Pro Well Cow project. And what we identified is that while farmers were making a lot of investment into milking facilities, there was very little investment into cubicle housing. So if you like, some of our warning red flags from 2015 have come to pass because all this research is just published in the past 2 or 3 years. Moving on then to this last example I want to give, which is the issue of sows farrowing in crates. As we know, there were major welfare issues for animals in farrowing crates. And Vivi Mooston, who's also in the audience here from Sedge's, did this little exercise which she shared with me. There are nearly 1 million sows in Denmark, and if you think that each time they're in the farrowing house, they're there for about 34 days, this equates for about 80 days per sow per year. And multiplied by all the million sows in Denmark, you're looking at nearly 200,000 years in the farrowing unit per year for the Danish sow herd. And this is in a situation where they can't move backwards or forwards. So not surprisingly, there's societal concerns. And really, the end the cage age was really looking for free farrowing. And there's a lot of fears around temporary crating, that sows might be kept in there all the time or whatever. But there is this, and we heard Andrea talk about the commitment to legislation. And again, it's a topic we covered in detail in the welfare of pigs on farms, the EFSA document. In response to that, the industry completed a document, the Copa-Cogeca document, outlining their concerns, which were associated with higher mortality rates and huge costs and a potential shrinking in the industry. And all of this, and Andrea actually referred to it as well, is limiting progress. There's a risk of adoption of suboptimal farrowing systems, etc. So there's a stagnation there and a conflict in the industry at the moment around this issue. Which brings me to a lovely trip I had to Denmark with Emma Baxter from SRUC and some Irish pig farmers and regulatory authority personnel to meet Vivi and visit some of the farms that have adopted freer farrowing or free lactation, at least, systems in Denmark. And we discussed this stalemate and this conflict. And in later meetings with Sandra Edwards in Edinburgh late last year, we undertook probably what's the best example of animal welfare scientists bridging policy and practice to navigate evidence from animal welfare science, proposed policy and practice to suggest a future-proof solution to the farrowing crate dilemma. We're considering a number of perspectives, really arguably a one welfare perspective, issues affecting the environment, the industry's perspective, stock persons, the animal, both based on the EFSA report and new information that has come to light since then, and all in, under the framework of existing or proposed policy. And what we want to do is come up with actionable recommendations on the main sticking points, being confinement time, temporary crating, pen shape, flooring, substrates. For example, for a confinement time is that we could suggest, now this isn't set in stone yet, but temporary crating might be permitted between 1 day prior to expected farrowing and 4 days after to balance the needs of the different stakeholders. And we feel that this is an insurance policy in moving towards freer farrowing, because it could allow, without any further investment and just slight modifications to existing pens for producers once they gain confidence to move to free farrowing. But given that there are no solutions, only trade-offs, and there will be trade-offs, and they are going to be from a one welfare perspective, there has to be give and take on all participants, I suppose. But we do feel that even by reducing the time spent in farrowing crates, it offers huge potential to improve the welfare of Europe's 12 million sows. So in summary, clearly everyone wants better welfare. The Eurobarometer shows it. Well Farmers Project shows the buy-in by farmers liaising with industry to try and address some of the welfare problems on farm. And Maria Hotzel talks about producers in this special issue of Animal Frontiers I talked about. You can tell just from the little taste I've given you the enormous, costly and lengthy efforts that have been gone to by animal welfare scientists. There is a real struggle for impact. And this is, partly because of enforcement issues. Obviously, outright bans are easily enforceable. They do offer huge potential to improve animal welfare, but we are running out of these very low-hanging fruit types wins when it comes to animal welfare, because the majority of the problems are multifactorial. They require holistic solutions. And you could say that we need more welfare, more research, more education, and Andrea referred to the partnership. But at the end of the day, and those of you who are at the Waffle Conference will know that we heard from Mette Hersken on the plight of the cull sow, and really none of those are going to help an animal that is essentially economically worthless, because it is very difficult to implement farm animal welfare research findings under the constraints of a highly cost-price-driven production model. And Andrea talked about the complications around the cap and the funding, and they're probably way beyond my ability to understand. But all I do know is that farmers, and you could swap this for dairy farmers, any farmers, really are in a race to stand still. To stay in that race, they're trying to achieve economies of scale, getting bigger and bigger, and exploiting genetic progress. And I have progress in inverted commas because it comes at a high cost to the animals, higher growth rates, higher yields, etc. And it's not just farm animals that pay a price. From a one welfare perspective, farmers are also paying a price in terms of stress, high levels of suicide, and humans in general are paying a price for intensification and economies of scale. And we only have to look as far as the FAO's livestock's long shadow to look at the environmental impact. And just in case anyone thought I was being harsh on Irish farmers, I can go to the Spanish for examples of environmental impact from their highly intensive pig industry. And it's an era of huge uncertainty and conflict and dilemma for farmers, and indeed for everyone, I suppose. And in this dilemma, then animal welfare is seen as simply another problem to be solved in a long, long list in this kind of divisive era that we're in. If we talk about sustainability, and I'm nearly finished, I think I've shown you and given you good examples why sustainability is so often distilled to money. In fact, it has 3 supporting pillars, namely social, environment, and economic, but animal welfare is only a component of the social pillar. So it is, and considering that money dominates, it really hasn't got a leg to stand on, if you like, in such a peripheral role. And I think this paper, which evaluated hundreds of papers on the sustainability of livestock sector, found a huge focus on carbon and greenhouse gas emissions, and why they called it carbon myopia, and very, very few papers into the single digits when you look at the social sustainability of livestock systems. And if you think that animal welfare is only a component of the social sustainability, you can see how much we are on the back foot in terms of achieving progress in animal welfare. So one thing we would really advocate for is that animal welfare is considered one of the main supporting pillars of sustainability. This is in line with Linda Keeling's plenary at the EAP, where she said good animal welfare is at the core of sustainable development. And she argued it should be seen as part of the solution and not part of the problem. And her paper is, in fact, included in this issue of Animal Frontiers. And I just want to say that Achim Spiller's plenary, also at the EAP, just in case anyone thinks our solutions are going to come from the marketplace, and I know, Andrea, you talked about that, he gave a really compelling case as to why solutions will not come from the marketplace. And he also gave a very compelling case as to why solutions will not come from policy at national level, the solutions to animal welfare. So I would urge you can see it on YouTube, to go and listen to those talks. So in conclusion, animal welfare scientists certainly play a crucial role in bridging policy and practice to protect the livestock sector's social license to produce. But in terms of real impact at farm level, I fear we are having much less impact. And it is increasingly difficult to achieve impact. So I don't know exactly how it's going to happen, but I do know, and I am at the point after 30 years, that there is a need for transformative change to develop production systems in which animals are farmed in line with their behavioral and biological needs. And with a one welfare approach, as I showed you throughout my presentation, we have to balance the needs of all, you know. And I'd like to thank the Department of Agriculture, which is funding a lovely project we have doing just that, called the One Well Pig project, which is looking at alternative systems of producing pigs. And last minute and last thing, and Andrea just asked me to do this, and I know Fabio also drew your attention to the EAP, which is happening in Innsbruck later this year, not next year. And I just want to show you that if you go to omega.eap.org, you can find a number of sessions related to animal health and welfare that you can submit abstracts to until the 1st of March. And we are actually, as the Health and Welfare Commission, involved in several other sessions than what are listed here, but these are the main ones. So I'd urge you to go and have a look at that and consider joining us in Innsbruck. And I'm really sorry about the slides, and thank you very much.
Super great. I mean, that's been very useful. I think it's not really a problem. We have these issues with slides. I mean, this is really recorded, so if really they want to see the details, I mean, they can actually go online. Yeah, I mean, you have presented many issues, going from the four issues that they have been presented very much in details, spanning from pigtail, the farrowing problem to the mean quota problem. I really like the idea of discussing the welfare as a three-pillar concept, where you have environmental welfare, industry welfare, and animal welfare. I was also a little bit, I would say, kind of, I had my attention really focused on the idea of defining sustainability as, I mean, it's clearly defined as a social, environmental, and economic, but I would say that, yeah, if my understanding is correct, I mean, you have mentioned that the animal welfare is part of the social, but I would also argue that you have clearly mentioned this dilemma that the industry and also the regulators are facing, of ensuring that firms are, are economically well set, while also, environmentally sustainable. So I would say, as an economist and policy, someone that is dedicated to policy, I was seeing this as a trade-off between this nature-based method of production, farrowing, free farrowing, and all of that. I mean, that's very nice. but also, the necessity to have intensive and market-based or market-oriented method of production. I see this is I see that there is a lot to do. I mean, it's impressive how much research has been produced, but it's clearly not the end, and therefore, I want to echo, your suggestion to continue attending those meetings, and therefore, next meeting in Innsbruck would be a good chance to hear more about this. But I don't want to monopolize the time. I know that there are gonna be questions at the end, and I believe that it's now time to have our next speaker, Imon Xian, that is with us. So thank you very much, Imon. And as all the other speakers, you have up to 20 minutes. And after this, we are gonna have a debate with all the questions that attendees are flagging in the chat. So Imon, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much. Hi everybody, my name is Eamon Sheehan and I'm dairy farming in Cuffsgrange, County Kilkenny. Our farm will be similar to 90% of the Irish dairy farms, meaning we're a spring calving grass-based system. For those of you that are not familiar with this, it means we calve all of our cows in February, March, and our cows' milk, peak milk production corresponds with our peak grass growing season of May through July. This gives us a competitive advantage against our fellow European farmers, which are mainly indoor, all year round calving systems, whether that's through contracts or for other purposes. And the disadvantage is that we all need labor at the same time during our busiest periods. But the advantage, as you can see by the aerial view of the farm behind me, is our cows spend 280 to 300 days outdoors grazing grass. I suppose just a background, I come from a beef and equine background. The opportunity to supply milk, as Laura said earlier, the new entrant in 2012 and the removal of milk quota in 2015 gave us the opportunity to reinvent ourselves and build a good business that will provide a good standard of living through milk production. I always had a keen interest in breeding and producing top quality stock, and I focused on health and fertility. Days in milk are the key component for us, and every cow that calves in the first every cow that doesn't calve in the first 5 to 6 weeks of the spring is losing between 500 to 600 euros in milk production over the course of the year. And interestingly, while I was studying how I could run a good farming business, I found a study by Cornell University's leading calf specialist, Mike van Amberg, and he stated that research and numerous on-farm assessments had shown that 70% of milk yield is due to management, with the remainder due to genetics. So this led me down a rabbit hole and figuring out where I could achieve my best results and best performance. And then I started to look into antimicrobial resistance and anthelmintic resistance, and it led me to applying for a Nuffield scholarship in 2017, studying antimicrobial resistance in the dairy and beef industry. So that's my farming, or I suppose my initial background, and I suppose I'm here to talk about practical examples of how scientific advances in animal welfare have positively impacted farming practices. And the main issue I think that has been hit on as well is labour is a huge issue for the majority of farming systems in Ireland, and not only labour but skilled labour is a huge issue. And this led me to investing quite substantially over the last number of years in automation in our milking systems, and through the installation of a sense of collars on the cows, which are giving real-time data on our cows 24 hours a day, 7 days of the week, 365 days a year. And it's the equivalent of having a full-time person standing with your stock at all times. So this real-time information is enabling us to be proactive in our approach to managing our cow health. And it's enabled us to use, I suppose, more, fluids and anti-inflammatories, because we're getting that data before our cows are actually visibly or physically sick. I also got an opportunity then to, I suppose, our milking routine. One of the biggest issues in our milking process is managing mastitis and also managing lameness, again, as Laura had mentioned. So the majority of farmers, we use milk recording maybe 6 to 12 times a year, and where we're taking individual samples from individual cows and getting that, getting that data on our cell count, our butterfat, protein. But those are only 6 to 12 days of that cow's full lactation of 300 days. And although it's better than no information, I found that it can be hugely affected by weather. Our weather is very, very changeable. Maybe stress factors of cows, maybe at that moment in time of that year, whether they were in estrus, or even factors of grass quality at that given time. So we installed an inline milk sensor, and this is recording every cow's constituents: yield, butterfat, protein, and somatic cell count at every milking throughout her lactation. So again, we're getting information, before a cow develops mastitis. We're getting that information again where we're able to treat that cow with use of fluid and anti-inflammatories. And also on the exit of our milking parlour, as our cows walk through a drafting system. And this drafting system, the collars speak to the drafting system. So if there's health issues, a cow will be drafted to be assessed afterwards to see if she's, if there's a health notification from the collars. And they also walk through a mobility scoring camera. So this is taking the condition score of the cow and also focusing on her mobility as she walks through that under that camera. And this is able to identify cows before they're visibly lame also. So again, we're getting that information where the cows will be automatically drafted, separated from the herd, and they can be treated, for maybe a minor bruise, or even there might be a little stone that was caught in the hoof or something like that, because our cows do a lot of walking on a daily basis due to grazing different paddocks pretty much every day. So that's allowed us to focus on our lameness issues. And again, these cows are able to walk through an automated foot bath, which will will enable them to avoid any issues with mortallaro or foul or any other minor hoof issues. So again, I suppose if we just go back over the systems that are in place, the sense of colours, which are pretty much a Fitbit for your cow. So, they're like your Apple Watch. They monitor everything that happens on that daily basis with that cow. We mainly bought them initially for breeding purposes. So we could use 100% AI on our cows to promote better genetic gain in our replacement heifers, and also to be able to use better beef bulls so that our calves had more value when we're selling them to meat farmers, so that we could use top genetics across the board, whether that was through dairy genetics or beef genetics, and also from a health and safety point of view. But one of the areas that I wasn't expecting from this was that the health benefits far outweighed the breeding benefits, because we were getting notifications from the collars on cows before they were visibly sick. And again, I suppose, to put it in simple terms, our cows' rumen is their engine. So cows, being herd animals, they don't, they don't come across as being visibly sick at the start. They'll keep up with the herd. They want to survive, and they'll keep moving. And it's only maybe 2 or 3 days later that they're visibly sick, and then it's too late. We're treating them with antibiotics. We're fighting, a health issue. Whereas now with the systems in place that we have, we get a notification that this cow is on the way down, feeling a little bit off. Like when we bring our kids to doctors, they tell you fluids, keep the fluids, anti-inflammatories and fluids. So again, this is an area where we're able to be proactive again in our approach, and it's enabling us to, to avoid the majority of antibiotic usage unless completely necessary. The inline milk sensors then, which are giving us the 300 days of real-time milking data, it's far superior to the 6 or 12 days of information that we get from milk recordings, which is also enabling us to be proactive in our approach to our drying off of our cows when our cows are at the end of their lactation. We are able to use between 80 to 90% of sealer rather than antibiotics in our cows during their dry period. And it's very important from the antimicrobial resistance point of view, but it's also very important for our cows, which are running with a very healthy udder tissue with no somatic cell conditions. So these cows are now only receiving a sealer to prevent any infection entering the udder, and it's also protecting the good bacteria that's in the cow's udder rather than wiping out everything with blanket antibiotic usage. Again, the other area that I was speaking about, the mobility scoring, the biggest cost to dairy farming is the replacement of our dairy cows. So a young first lactation heifer, when she joins the herd at 2 years of age, she's costing between 1,500 to 1,800 euros when she joins the herd. So lameness is a big issue on dairy farms, and again, being proactive in that approach where we're able to treat a cow before she becomes visibly lame, and preventing the issues arising enables us to keep cows in the herd longer. And the average farm in Ireland would run at maybe a 20% replacement rate, and that's quite standard. But in areas with issues with lameness, you might be up at 30%, and an extra 10% of your herd being replaced is quite substantial in cost. And we need to avoid that at all costs. But all of this technology is fantastic, and it's very important and beneficial to us to have it from my point of view and from the people who work with me, their point of view, because it makes their life easier. And you're not we're all busy, we can't see everything at all at every given time. So having this information at hand enables us to focus on the smaller details. And one of the most important parts of the puzzle is the start of our calves' lives, through colostrum management. When our calves are born, there's no passive transfer of immunoglobulins through the umbilical cord. Like in humans, the baby, its immune system is developed from its mother through the umbilical cord. But your calf, when it's born, is born with no immunity. So the importance of getting colostrum into that calf on day, in the first hours of its birth, of its life, to build a good immune system, which therein sets that calf up for life. We also use microbes in the calves and set up good health. All this in turn preventing any health issues as that calf develops. And it's the importance of healthy calves in the beginning of their lifestyle is leading to less antibiotic usage. We also, laboratories are taking dung samples, and they're able to tell us, give us the information on what animals need to be treated with anthelmintex, and in turn, it's allowing stock to build resistance to worm burdens, which wasn't the case when herds were being blanket treated. And this in turn, it has a huge benefit. It's a big, huge circular economy. Like these changes that we've made through the use of this technology, and also through the use of this information that that's available to us from the work that we're doing. It's improved wildlife, and it's improved soil health, and this has all been through a resurgence in dung beetles, which were being affected by the blanket treatment of ivermectins in our stock. In turn, we're killing dung beetles in the field, because as they worked on digesting and breaking down the dung fields. So this huge big circle in the ecosystem has benefited our farm through the resurgence of dung beetles, which are breaking down the dung pats in the fields, which are preventing excess worm larvae and nuisance fly larvae building up during our summer periods, and in turn has improved the amount of bats on the farm that are living on the dung beetle, and also kestrels that are resident on the farm as well. So I think the importance of everything that we're doing, and we realize the big knock-on effect of of how we're farming, can show that our large-scale farms can work hand in hand with biodiversity, and we can all benefit from this information and the changes that we're making. I think that's all that I've really got for you there now. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Yeah, very interesting. And thanks for actually giving your your focus on the practical issues that you find in business. I think, you discussed about many issues. So one of the, I would say, the thing that has been, I've been more hit by is the practical way to avoid the occurrence of mastitis. So we were actually discussing a practical way to monitor milk production, and this is actually how you I would say operationalize what the policy is actually asking. So we actually need to fight antimicrobial resistance, but from your point of view, it's much more than that. Clearly, when you have mastitis, you are losing production, you are having an economic loss. So for you, going much further is clearly a priority. You also mentioned the big problem of skilled labor. So that's another problem that you mentioned at the very beginning. But I don't want to actually take much from of the time from of the attendees in listening me. So let me say that this is really the time where we should have all speakers together with the webcam open, and we should probably start to debate. So I invite Andrea. Laura is already in, and I believe there are already a couple of questions that I noted. There is a long one that I'm going to read in a moment. That's pretty long. So let me read it. But there are a couple of issues that have been really pointed. One is, I would say, pretty much a general point. So immunocompetence has been said that is a huge problem, and on the other hand, it is the problem of having mortality and morbidity both rising. So can you give like a 1.5 minute? I know that I'm very short in terms of time, but your impression on this. So what the policy is trying to do to face this, what the science may suggest, and what is the point of view of the businesses. So I would go with Andrea first, and then Laura, and then Imon. So the question is basically, given immunocompetence is a big issue, and mortality and morbidity are both raising. What you see in the future, what should be done? We can't hear you.
Yeah, now it's back. Sorry,
Okay.
I forgot one of the button. There was a flu in the micro. First of all, thank you to Laura and Imon for their presentation. Extremely interesting, and I'm very pleased that I had time to listen to them carefully. It's not easy sometimes to abstract yourself for the everyday life here in the office. So that's really useful. Interesting what, in particular, to come to your question, there is definitely an evolution in the way, and it was mentioned by you, in the way we could step up the management of the livestock at a farm level with digital technologies and with the sensors, elements that are not present today in what is the common practices of farming. And one of the elements that come from the different work and the research done is the fact that in certain sector, pigs is one, there is a very limited access to these technologies because they are in particularly very costly. So the affordability of this is not surely something that we have to underestimate as a component when we have to implement or phase in certain farming practices. The problem we had in listening to farmers here and there, for example, in Finland, where you have the complete ban of the tail docking in a stronger way compared with the EU directive. Definitely, when you see and you talk with them, you learn one thing, that the skills, the way they've been targeting and improving their system is also based on the mistakes that are done by the others. It is quite an interesting element because the way they evolve, for example, the way being evolving their way of approaching this issue, assisted by the technical and scientific world, is done also based on very, very practical experience in putting the technology in place, in finding solution and all the rest. I think that one element that we could really, because we talk about the future evolution of our standards, they should come in the end with really an important platform of exchange of technologies and knowledge that could be offered on permanent basis for the implementation of the future standards. But they start with a lot of training and formation and of course support for this before. That could be a very important element also to integrate in the common agricultural policy future. Training and formation on really the technologies that are available in the way to implement them, and then the support for their accessibility. It's clear that certain technologies are more will be more democratic, in a sense, accessible, even when they will expand to be used more and more, as usual. No, this is typical of a technology that is becoming more and more popular. But it's also, I think, the education part is also an important task because it helps to also approach with a new mentality the investment in advanced technologies for zootechnics. And modernizing it for me is that. I hope it helps this answer. Very general, not specific, as I know, but I try to keep a more general approach on that.
Well, I think it's very practical indeed.
Yeah.
So as one of the stakeholders, I guess, involved in this, I think it's a very practical. So a platform that is actually facilitating the exchange of information and practical information on the use of technology, how to reach the standards and how to implement them there. Yeah, that's absolutely super practical. You have also been very practical in saying this can actually land into new common agricultural policy. So I think that the recipe is very well accepted from our side. But I'll stop here, Laura.
Thanks, Fabio. So, the talk was about ever increasing. We have ever increasing clearly, and it's going to vary between the species. We have ever increasing intensity of production in an effort to stay in the race, as one of my slides said, because what farmers are battling is ever increasing costs of production. Like they're only going in one direction, the cost of production. We have price volatility, if not decreasing price. So in that, like my problem, my concern, and that's what I was trying to get across, is that in that model, there is no room for many farmers for technology. You know, I mean, there are concerns that technology is encouraging further intensification of agriculture, because it will be only through economies of scale that very big farmers can actually exploit technology. So we're losing some of the smaller family farms that, you know, that society wants to keep in the production model, that society wants their food to come from. So, and then in this effort to stay in the race in which costs are always going up and prices are static, if not going down, farmers have to push their animals harder. Like this is the problem. Like unless we really get to the nub, I think, of the issue, I don't know how we certainly can solve it with technology or with education or with respect, Andrea, to you. I suppose my 30 years is taking its toll on me, and I am starting to feel increasingly frustrated at the lack of progress. And I cannot see how further research and education is going to address the inherent fact that the model, there is no room in the model for animal welfare. There's barely room for human welfare. There's barely room for, only through punitive actions from the EU will there be room for environmental welfare because of, you know, enforcement of legislation on farmers and all the rest. So, you know, I suppose the solution comes from a number of different areas, and there has to be better enforcement of existing legislation. But farmers are in a bind. The industry is in a bind, and animals, I feel, and farmers themselves at an individual level are losing out. And I actually don't see any silver bullets out there that's going to solve this problem, because we can only push animals so far. And while they are performing better and ever increasingly better, growing faster, more milk, it's taking a toll on them, and that toll is reflected in morbidity, culling rates, and like Eamon, with, you know, this might not be to the same extent in dairy, in the dairying system. I know we have fairly good longevity compared to total confinement systems on the continent. You know, our dairy cows probably live longer, and we definitely have welfare advantages, but it still doesn't deny that it's a cost price model, and the effort is always to reduce cost of production, which inevitably means cutting on animal welfare issues. And when you see that animal welfare is at the bottom of the pile compared to the other issues, you can see why, you know, progress is just so, I'm sorry, just looks so impossible, increasingly impossible. And I mean, I'd love if some of my colleagues out there would chime in on this, because I know from talking to them that they feel the same way. Certainly those of us who are in this game for as long as I am, we do feel, what more can we do? What more research is needed to show, you know, what more research is needed to show that there are problems out there, that they need to be improved, but that there is no impact at farm level, very little impact. We might be just about holding our own on some issues like lameness in dairy cows. We might be just about keeping it static, but it's high. So it's a race. That's why I use that slide. It's a race to the bottom. And, you know, I wouldn't make these strong points except for it's founded on the basis of many, many discussions and many conferences in the past, literally 6 months. and visits to countries all over, and speaking to animal welfare scientists all over. So, you know, I think to some degree or other, people would probably relate to what I'm saying. And I'm sorry if I hogged the floor there, but that is the reality from our perspective.
No, I think it's, I mean, we have to say, when we organized this, we didn't want to have like a smooth debate. I mean, we really want to have some positions that are different. And I don't think that there is any problem in saying this very straight, that you are a little bit less optimistic, let's put it this way. I'm kind of, you know, I'm putting a little of sugar on the bitter drink that you that you gave us. But I don't want to take much time. Before, I want to hear from Imon what his view on this aspect.
Thanks. Yeah, I think I can understand Laura's points there as well. But I think if you look at the average herd size in Ireland, now this is from an Irish perspective, you're still less than 100 cows per farm. And you need to have that 100 cow herd for a next generation to farm alongside their parents. And you know, so the majority of farms, you're talking one unit farms, and access to land is a huge issue in Ireland, especially. You know, so I think we're seeing a decrease in cow numbers in the country over the last couple of years. The removal of quotas, obviously, you're going to see a huge surge from an industry that had been curtailed for over 30 years with no expansion. And I think a lot of people found that, yeah, they pushed their system a little bit beyond where their farm was capable of managing that stock. Some people have come back down. Some people have found their happy place. But I think, you know, cow health is a huge, you know, it's on every farmer's mind. An unhealthy cow is an unproductive cow, and we can't afford to lose cows out of our system. The majority of herds in the country would be pushing around the 4 to 4.5 cows on an average lactation, 4.5 years old. So as the herds mature, your milk production is peaking as well. So it's, I think, in the majority of farms is a good place to be. But there is a huge investment required, and there actually has been grants available for excess slurry storage, which in turn will create more storage. But I think every farmer should take it on themselves to make sure that they have adequate infrastructure for the amount of stock that they have on farm. There's no room for you know, animals being mistreated, and I think I can wholeheartedly say that, you know, the majority of farmers that are out there, the cows and their stock are their main interest, more so than themselves at times, unfortunately. But I also think that the consumer needs to understand that food isn't cheap. It has never been cheap, and it has been subsidized over the years through single farm payment, cap payments. And somebody that will go off and buy a coffee in the shop and give €4 without a thought, but will argue over a litre of milk costing €1 or €1.50. You know, this is what our supermarkets have created, is that food is cheap and it's readily available, and it's very untrue. We're, as a European Union, we're not sufficient, you know, not sustainable in our milk and meat production, and I think that we need to look at this from you know, from a serious point of view, and you know, the red tape that we answer to through our agricultural policies and through our Department of Agriculture within the European Union is quite stringent in a lot of areas. So you know, yeah, I think there needs to be a lot more effort put in at times, but also the consumer needs to understand the cost of food production.
Yeah, it's a very interesting point, and I guess that this is also, you know, introducing much broader issue that has been pointed in the chat, particularly, just to synthesize, you have clearly mentioned that animal welfare is a priority for you, for the producers. But I also like this idea of challenging the system itself. This is bringing to the supermarket revolution, as a development economist said. But why I'm making this slide? Let me connect a few dots. So in the chat, we have been asked if there are first concrete ideas from the policymakers to limit production. So limit production, because this is actually, I would say, like per capita production, so per cow production, per pig production, in order to avoid stress and mortality. Then it's also been pointed that the system should actually probably incentivize the consumption of production that is coming from the local producers. And this is bringing to, I would say, that the final point that has been made in the chart, that is how the policy is addressing this instead of focusing on technology, if there are measures. And let me a little bit provocative, because I believe this is going to be the last round, and I know that Andrea is already ready to reply. So do we need actually new regulation, or do we need more incentives to avoid the catastrophe that Laura was actually depicting? So Andrea, I hope this is not too much for you, but we would like to hear from you, and then from Laura and Imon on this. So what is the role of the policy, basically? More regulation, more incentives, any concrete action to change the system and move from something that is really market oriented to something that it goes back to the natural based way of producing?
Well, sophisticated question to pick up in a few minutes, Fabio, indeed. But I am reading also with interest the chat from the side here. Actually, is a wide question, but let's start from one point, and I wish to also answer to Laura. We have a moment now in which the European Union is probably the largest producer of food of animal origin in the world, if we put it together, that invested with the longest tradition of experience and, we can say, social attitude in animal welfare. Sometimes we have been going to speak about animal welfare in countries where the word animal welfare does not even exist in the language of the country you are visiting. Yeah? Allora, today we are going to talk about this with our trading partner, and you realize that this concept that we developed with the wisdom of scientists, farmers, and technologists 30 years ago, under the pressure of a society, in any case, that is a democratic society, this element stimulated innovation and a way of producing that is a European way of doing things. That if you now go somewhere in the world, you see that a lot of this has been taken up and inspired, and also an area in a sector where investments are ongoing. The role of the policy of the EU in the agricultural area, we are in animal welfare is part of the agricultural area, is clearly now reaching a limit, because, as I was saying, the only step up, in my opinion, is the way we could really embrace the future of farming through reappropriation of this need of leading with European values globally. So farmer community, farming an animal, is a value for the European society, it's a strong one. And in my opinion, we have to really make policy choices that will allow us to reappropriate this and sell it as it was sold 30 years ago. It's not a question of limiting the size of a farm or giving more space to an animal only. It's more sophisticated than before. And also that's why I'm still insisting, it's still too little what we have done today in two directions. One, data gathering. We miss a lot of data on animals and welfare to make the choices appropriate and timely. We need more capacity. So digitalization and data collection is extremely important. And second, we need more resources to update the way we inform, educate about animal welfare, but not the consumer, because Imon is right about the consumer in the sense of the capacity of choice and whatever. But to be honest with you, we are going through a period of declining in power of purchasing behavior and purchasing power for the consumers. And clearly is in every sector. This could be read in two ways. One way is I keep buying the same but cheaper in terms of food. Or the second way is I buy a little less but higher price. And this is only a question of education. If I'm eating high quality products from a farmer and I'm choosing it on purpose, in my family I do that. I do with the limit of my budget, of course. But if it is becoming a way of living, I think we have enough capacity to choose the source of our food from the capacity of provide food in an internal market with a circuit that is economically sustainable, because we have a single market and we trade stuff from everywhere. So if I like a particular cheese like Parmigiano Reggiano in Brussels, I cannot eat every day because it's very expensive, but I know that it's providing a good welfare to some animal and to some farmer. And the same for some cheddar, sure, from Ireland, that I can buy in Brussels, actually. So it's an important element for me, these terms of education that go hand in hand. And I will concentrate more in these efforts in my decision as a simple policymaker from my side. But as I said, to be ready for this evolution, we need more and more data than what we have today. And we do have to collect in the next years more about the reality of farming and the capacity of investment we have for progressing on that. So this is what I can put together at the last comment now, before leaving you in a few minutes.
Well, this is, if we were actually playing soccer, this is really an assist for me to flag again that that's exactly what we want to do here in Florence with the Florence School of Regulation. So please take a minute to scroll up in the chat, and you have actually the opportunity to tell us that we need a training, we need professional trainings, we need to focus on those topics more and more. I mean, thanks very much, Andrea. I mean, it was a tough question, so I recognize that, but the way you you address that is fantastic. So, and personally, I agree. You know, it's it's data gathering, digitalization. Those are big issues, but they can actually clearly have an impact. And I also personally liked, as a trade economist, this idea of saying, yeah, it's not all about Europe. It's exporting. Our way of thinking, and this nowadays is very timely due to the shift in geopolitical power that we all observe. So thank you very much. I think it was super great. But now let's see the critical voice.
In any
Sorry?
case, thanks to you, Fabio. In any case, in fact, was not to provide you an assist, but it's really what I believe at the core of our future, to be honest, and what is shared with me by many of the people that I've been talking about.
So with this endorsement of the head of unit of DG Sante, you have all the reason to fill the survey. But apart from joke, Laura, you have now the critical voice. So please go ahead, or not.
I don't want to
critical.
be seen as the critical pessimist here. And I don't mean to catastrophize in any way, because I really like what you were saying, Andrea, about the core European values. And like the whole world, and at our conference last year in, you know, at the Waffle conference, there were people from Latin America, from South America, from, you know, Asia, from everywhere. And like, they were worried about a stagnation in progress in terms of legislation in the EU, because while they're way below it in terms of level of legislation and everything, they look to the EU for improvements and they raise their baseline in that way. So, you know, it really made me see that, yes, I can see a benefit in more legislation, but ideally I would like to see a lot of what's already there being better enforced, and it varies hugely between member states, the level of enforcement. And I don't want to be advocating for farmers to be beaten with a stick, because I am, as much more than a welfare scientist, an animal welfare scientist, I'd like to consider myself in the one welfare sphere. And I have many friends who are farmers, and I'm very concerned about levels of mental health problems, etc., amongst the farming community that I know of. So there are very real pressures out there, and it's not just on animals, as I tried to emphasize in my talk. But I think those core European values are what got us here. It's what a lot of my colleagues who were online there, in terms of all the research we've done and all the work and all the wonderful legislation, it's something to be very proud of. But all I am kind of cautioning is that we're reaching kind of the peak of our ability to effect change within this production model. You know, the low-hanging fruit, the tail docking, the stalls, the cages. You know, after that, we're talking about very multifactorial problems that require holistic solutions. And that's just the main point I want to get across. And the other main point I really have to just get across is about the consumer. And I know, Eamon, you're saying it, and I fully get it myself. People are not prepared to pay. But in that issue of animal frontiers, and I think Molly Harrison is in the audience here, she's a nice paper on willingness to pay by consumers, etc. And I think other papers on labeling in that issue also talk about it. And Achim Spiller's plenary at the EAAP, we cannot, and his vast experience of looking for solutions from the marketplace show they will not come from the marketplace. And the main reason being that the consumer expects a certain level of welfare and environmental sustainability, and it's just an expectation. They feel it is a given from any production system, and why should they have to pay more for it? So this is one of his main reasons. It's not my opinion. It's basically Achim's from that talk. So I don't think we can expect solutions to come from the marketplace in terms of willingness to pay more. It will lift a few niche industries up, but that will do nothing for the 12 million European sows that are in commercial intensive systems. And I know there was another question there about limiting size, and it's not necessarily to do with size. It just so happens the production intensity is going up as well as herd unit size is going up, but I don't know which is more the cause of these welfare and longevity threats. But it'll take a myriad of different systems. We have a very monoculture system in general of animal production. We're moving that way, and it takes a myriad of different systems, some of them intensive, but with a one welfare approach, like, for example, the Kipster eggs production, carbon neutral, huge employee satisfaction, won awards for animal welfare, and it's an intensive, relatively indoor system. So it takes, you know, it takes bigger thinking and more diversity in our production systems, I think, to achieve these improvements for one welfare, not just animal welfare. That's me done now. I'll be quiet.
No, I think it's, yeah, we appreciate, I guess I can speak on behalf of everyone, very clear. So you really think that we have limited production improvements and consumers, maybe this is where we can leverage the change. Eamon, that's your turn. I want to just wrap up because I know that Andrea has kind of time limit. So yeah.
Thanks.
Sorry.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose from speaking from an Irish production point of view, I suppose our cows really are not on peak production levels. We average maybe 5.5 to 6,000 kilos of milk per cow per year. So, we could get more out of those cows if we fed them more intensively. But we have to look at what's our most cost efficient way of producing milk. And that's through grazing grass and taking advantage of our competitive gain that's available to us. I suppose the other, as one of the questions was there about limiting scale. A lot of the farms, again, I see the farms that are most under pressure are maybe the farms that are in between livestock numbers, whereby there's more than they can manage themselves, but not enough for them to be able to feasibly employ a full-time person with them. So I think, in the majority of systems, again, in the Irish system, dairy is probably the most efficient and financially viable in the Irish system. So I think we really have to look after that industry. There's in our own local area, there's 4,500 people supplying Tirlon. 1,500 of those are milking 50 cows or less. So there is quite a broad number of farmers that are individual unit farms with the other person in the relationship working off farm, other farms that are viable with another successor coming through. So I think it's important that those systems are protected.
Yeah, very, very clear, a very clear message from a business point of view. I know again that we may want to close a few minutes earlier, so I want to just give Andrea the opportunity to say one last word, or if not, I can just close. I mean, it's up to you, really, if there is one last thing that you want to flag.
What an honor. To be honest, I don't think it's this webinar has been very important, very good for the opportunity that we had, Laura and Imon together, as we have a producer and a scientist and a policymaker sitting head to head. I think it is a very appreciated way to exchange quick and fast and very educative. That's why it's difficult to wrap up on something like this, because it is an evolving scenario. And now I think with a certain urgency, the fact. And as I said, we need I think we need to encourage this type of exchanges more and more. And we need to encourage them at every level. This is a level of people that are having their hands on the business, me and the unit and so on. But in fact, the more the people with hands on the business could exchange with this type of formulas, the more I think we could create up a plan and a program for what is an evolution that is needed. I would like to say that the most important element that I see now is that we're preparing for large consultation for what will be the next plan of this commission. The vision of agriculture, as I said, will be adopted in a few days. And for me, is the best opportunity to reconvene after that the political masters have put in the vision what they believe the next action for the next 5 years, to see exactly the way to prioritize and to invest and to do the best to respond. For me, we have a great opportunity because we never had such a reflection in this area at European level, so vast as the strategic dialogue. The times are really the good times for it, in the sense there is an urgency we all know from every side. So I think more than this is just to say, I think that I'm happy to be contributing further and to listen further. And I know Laura very well, of course, and I know I would like to know more about all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Thank you all. I think this is super great. I mean, this is what we are also establishing at the AUI with a new initiative of Florence School of Regulation Agri-Food. That's pretty new. It's not yet established, but it's coming exactly because, as Andrea said, it's really the momentum we need to take to help the agenda of the Commission moving in a new direction. So we want to give our little contribution. But again, thank you, Andrea, for flagging the beauty of this initiative. Thanks, Andrea. Thanks, Laura. Thanks, Imon. Thanks, Federico and Andrea Rosati, for organizing all of this. And see you next time.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Escaping now. To the next.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.